At 10:37 p.m. on March 25, 1983, Fred Astaire, the greatest dancer in Hollywood history, picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd never called before. On the other end was a 24-year-old who had just performed on the Motown 25 TV special. Fred Astaire, 83 years old, was calling to say 4 words that would validate everything Michael Jackson had worked for. The move that made Fred Astaire pick up the phone lasted exactly 8 seconds. We call it the Moonwalk. 3 weeks before that historic phone call, Michael Jackson was in a heated argument with the most powerful people in music television. The location was a production meeting for Motown 25, Yesterday, Today, Forever, the celebration of Motown Records' silver anniversary. Producer Don Mischer and executive producer Suzanne DePass had assembled an all-star lineup: Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, The Temptations, The Supremes, and, almost as an afterthought, the Jackson 5, who had launched their careers at Motown in the late 60s. But there was a problem, a big one. Michael Jackson wanted to perform his new song, Billie Jean, and Don Mischer was having none of it. "Look," Mischer said, his voice firm but respectful. "This is a Motown anniversary special. We're here to celebrate the label's history, its classic hits. Billie Jean isn't even a Motown song. It's on Epic Records." Michael, sitting across the conference table, remained calm but determined. "I'll do the Motown medley with my brothers," he said quietly, "but I want to do Billie Jean too, alone. It's important." Suzanne DePass jumped in. "Michael, think about this logically. If we let you do a new song, what happens Monday morning when Marvin Gaye calls and asks why he couldn't perform his new material? Or Stevie? We set a precedent we can't defend." But Michael wasn't budging. "Then I won't do the show at all," he said, standing up from the table. It wasn't a threat, it was a simple statement of fact. He believed in this performance so completely that he was willing to walk away from the biggest TV special of the year. What Don Mischer and Suzanne DePass didn't know was that Michael had been planning something for almost 2 years. Something that had never been done on live television. Something that would make the fight over which song he performed completely irrelevant. In June of 1981, Michael had arranged secret dance lessons with a street dancer named Jaron Casper Candidate. Michael had seen dancers doing a move called the backslide on Soul Train and in clubs around Los Angeles. He was mesmerized by the illusion of walking forward while gliding backward. For weeks, Casper worked with Michael in private, breaking down the technique. It wasn't just about the feet, Casper explained. It was about the upper body staying perfectly still while the legs did all the work. It was about the weight transfer, the toe placement, the smoothness of the glide. Michael practiced obsessively. In his home studio, in hotel rooms on tour, during breaks from recording Thriller, he practiced until his feet ached and his legs burned. He practiced until he could do it blindfolded. He practiced until it looked effortless. But he told almost no one, not his brothers, not his manager, not the producers of Motown 25. Because Michael understood that if people knew what he was planning, they might try to stop him. They might say it was too risky for live TV, too unusual, too weird. So he kept it secret, and he insisted on performing Billie Jean, because that was the song he'd chosen to unveil his secret to the world. After 3 days of negotiations, a compromise was reached. Michael would perform the Motown medley with his brothers, celebrating the Jackson 5's greatest hits. But he would also get a solo slot to perform Billie Jean. Don Mischer wasn't happy about it, but he was a professional. If Michael Jackson wanted to perform a non-Motown song at a Motown anniversary special, fine. At least they'd have him on the show. What Mischer didn't anticipate was what would happen at the rehearsal on March 24th, the day before the taping. The Pasadena Civic Auditorium was mostly empty during afternoon rehearsals. A few crew members working on lighting, some sound technicians adjusting levels, and a handful of Motown legends who had stopped by to watch other performers run through their sets. Linda Ronstadt was there, Smokey Robinson. Diana Ross had dropped in between fittings for her costume. The auditorium, which would seat 3,000 the next day, felt cavernous and quiet. "Okay, Michael, Don Mischer called out from the control booth. "Whenever you're ready. Let's run through Billie Jean." Michael walked onto the stage wearing casual rehearsal clothes, jeans, a red shirt, and a fedora. No costume, no special effects. Just Michael, a microphone stand, and the stage. The music started. Michael began singing, and then, about a minute into the song, he did it. He moonwalked. 8 seconds, gliding backward while his body suggested forward motion. Defying physics, defying expectation, creating an illusion so perfect that even from far away, it looked like magic. The handful of people in the auditorium fell completely silent. Then Smokey Robinson started clapping. Then Linda Ronstadt. Then everyone. Don Mischer leaned forward in the control booth. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. "I don't know," his assistant director said, "but we need to make sure every camera catches it tomorrow." Mischer grabbed his radio. "Camera operators, listen up. Tomorrow during Michael's performance, I don't care what your shot list says. When he does that backward slide thing, I want at least 3 cameras on him, wide, medium, and tight. We cannot miss that Diana Ross, standing in the wings, turned to Suzanne de Passe." "Did you know he could do that?" "No," Suzanne said, shaking her head in amazement. "I don't think anyone did." On the morning of March 25, 1983, Michael's costume designer laid out the outfit he would wear for Billie Jean. But there was something unusual about it. Black sequined jacket, check black pants with the legs slightly too short to show his footwork, check black fedora, check one white sequined glove for the right hand, check but the socks didn't match. One silver sock, one regular black sock. "Michael," the designer said, "I think there's been a mistake. We only have one sequined sock." Michael smiled. "No mistake. That's exactly right. One silver sock, one black sock. But they don't match." "They're not supposed to match," Michael explained. "I want people looking at my feet. The single silver sock will catch the light. It'll draw the eye exactly where I want it when I moonwalk." It was another detail that Michael had thought through completely. Nothing was accidental. Everything served the illusion he was about to create. By 7 p.m. on March 25th, the Pasadena Civic Auditorium was packed with 3,000 people. Celebrities, Motown executives, invited guests, and fans who had won tickets through radio contests. They had come to see the Motown legends, to hear the classic songs, to celebrate 25 years of the most influential record label in American history. Nobody in that audience knew they were about to witness something that would be replayed millions of times, copied by millions of people, and talked about for decades. They had no idea that this spring evening in Pasadena would mark a moment when popular culture shifted on its axis. The show began with tributes to Berry Gordy, Motown's founder. Diana Ross performed, The Temptations brought the audience to their feet, Marvin Gaye's smooth vocals filled the auditorium. It was a night of nostalgia, celebration, and classic hits. And then it was time for Michael Jackson. First came the Jackson 5 medley. Michael and his brothers performed their greatest hits, the songs that had made them stars as children. I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save. The audience loved it, clapping and singing along. Then Michael's brothers left the stage, and Michael, alone now in his black sequined jacket, silver sock, and fedora, stood at the microphone. "I like those songs," Michael said to the audience, "but especially I like the new songs." The opening beat of Billie Jean began, that unforgettable bass line, the synthesizer. Michael started to move, his body responding to the music with a precision that seemed superhuman. He danced through the first verse, spins, poses. The crowd was already on its feet. This was Michael Jackson unleashed, without his brothers, showing exactly what he could do. And then, at 1 minute and 28 seconds into the performance, it happened. Michael posed, weight on his right leg, left leg pointed. Then he began to glide, backward, smooth as silk. His body suggested he was walking forward, but he moved backward across the stage as if the floor had turned to ice. 8 seconds. That's all it was. 8 seconds of the impossible made real. The audience erupted. Not polite applause, not appreciative clapping. A roar, a primal scream of collective astonishment. 3,000 people reacting to something they had never seen before and couldn't quite believe they were seeing now. In the control booth, Don Mischer was yelling into his headset, "Camera 3, stay on his feet. Camera 1, get his face. Camera 2, wide shot." In the audience, people were grabbing the arms of those next to them. "Did you see that? How did he do that?" Backstage, members of the Temptations and the Supremes were watching monitors, their jaws literally dropped open. Michael continued dancing, spins and poses, but the moonwalk was all anyone would remember. When the performance ended, the standing ovation lasted so long that the show's schedule fell behind by 4 minutes. Immediately after his performance, Michael walked off stage and into the wings, away from the cameras, away from the applause that was still thundering from the auditorium. And he started to cry. His manager, confused, rushed over. "Michael, what's wrong? That was incredible. Everyone's going crazy out there." But Michael was shaking his head, tears streaming down his face. "It wasn't good enough," he said. "I could have done better. The spin on the second verse was sloppy. I should have held the final pose longer." This was Michael Jackson's curse and his gift. The performance that had just blown everyone's mind, the 8 seconds that would change dance history, wasn't good enough for him. He had seen the flaws that no one else could see. He demanded perfection from himself that exceeded what anyone else even thought was possible. That night, after the taping ended, Michael went home to his family's estate in Encino. He was exhausted, emotionally drained, and still unsure about his performance. At 10:37 p.m., the phone rang. Katherine Jackson answered. "Hello, is this Michael Jackson's residence?" an elderly voice asked. "Yes, it is. May I ask who's calling?" "This is Fred Astaire. I'd like to speak with Michael if he's available." Katherine nearly dropped the phone. Fred Astaire. The Fred Astaire. Calling her house. Asking for Michael. She called upstairs. "Michael, phone for you." "Who is it, Mother?" Michael called back. Katherine paused, not quite believing the words she was about to say. "It's Fred Astaire." Michael rushed downstairs, convinced there must be some mistake. Fred Astaire didn't call people. Fred Astaire was a legend, an icon, someone who existed in old movies and Hollywood history. But it really was him. "Is this Michael?" Fred's voice came through the receiver. "Yes, sir, Mr. Astaire, this is Michael. I watched the special tonight. I taped it, and I just watched it again. You're a hell of a mover, kid. You really put them on their asses last night." Michael couldn't speak. The greatest dancer of the 20th century was calling him a hell of a mover. It was impossible. It was wonderful. It was the validation Michael had craved his entire career. Fred continued, "You're an angry dancer. I'm the same way. I used to do the same thing with my cane. That moonwalk, or whatever you call it, that was something special. You've got it, kid. You've really got it." When Michael hung up the phone 10 minutes later, he was crying again. But this time, they weren't tears of disappointment. They were tears of joy, relief, and validation from the one person whose opinion mattered most. The Motown 25 special wouldn't air on NBC until May 16th, almost 2 months after it was taped. But something happened the very next morning that told Don Mischer the show was going to be special. Mischer was in Washington, D.C., scheduled to interview First Lady Nancy Reagan for another project. He walked into his hotel lobby. Everyone was talking about Michael Jackson. He got in a taxi to go to the White House. The driver was talking about Michael Jackson. In the East Wing of the White House, waiting to meet the First Lady, he overheard staff members talking about Michael Jackson. Somehow, Mischer said years later, even though the show hadn't aired yet, word had gotten out. People who'd been in that audience were calling friends, describing what they'd seen. It was spreading like wildfire. I realized then that we'd captured something historic. When Motown 25 finally aired on May 16, 1983, 47 million people watched. That's 47 million. In a country of 230 million people, 1 out of every 5 Americans tuned in. The next day, everyone was trying to moonwalk. Kids in school hallways, adults in office buildings, The move became so ubiquitous that physical education teachers started receiving requests to teach it. Dance studios added Moonwalk classes. Music stores couldn't keep Thriller in stock. The album, which had been released in November 1982, had already been successful. But after Motown 25, it became a phenomenon. It would go on to become the best-selling album of all time, and that 8-second moonwalk played a significant role. But the moonwalk was more than just a dance move. It was a cultural moment that transcended music and entertainment. For the first time in the television era, white kids in suburban America were spending their allowance money to buy an album by a young black artist and practicing his dance moves in their living rooms. Cultural barriers that had stood for decades began to crumble. Michael Jackson wasn't just a performer, he was a unifier, and the moonwalk, in its own way, was a bridge between worlds that had been separate. Years later, music critic Nelson George would write that Michael's moonwalk combined Jackie Wilson's athleticism with James Brown's dance moves, creating something entirely new that honored the past while pointing toward the future. Michael Jackson performed the moonwalk thousands of times after that March night in 1983. He perfected it. He added variations. He made it even smoother, even more impossible looking. His 1995 performance at the MTV Awards is considered by many to be his finest moonwalk, even better than the original. But nothing would ever capture the magic of that first public performance. The surprise, the audacity, the moment when 3,000 people, and eventually 47 million more, saw something they'd never seen before and could barely believe was real. Fred Astaire, who lived until 1987, would sometimes do a little moonwalk with his fingers when he saw Michael at industry events. It was his way of acknowledging the younger dancer who had taken the art form he loved and pushed it into the future. Michael Jackson's first moonwalk reminds us that true innovation requires courage. Michael fought for the chance to perform Billie Jean. He practiced in secret for 2 years. He risked looking foolish on national television in front of his peers and heroes. But he believed in his vision so completely that he was willing to take that risk. And in doing so, he created a moment that has been replayed, analyzed, and celebrated for over 40 years. It reminds us that perfection is the enemy of progress. Michael cried backstage because he thought his performance wasn't good enough, but everyone else saw genius. Sometimes we're so close to our own work that we can't see its impact. And it reminds us that validation from our heroes matters. Fred Astaire's phone call meant more to Michael than any award or chart position. When the people we admire recognize our work, it gives us permission to believe in ourselves. At 10:37 p.m. on March 25, 1983, an 83-year-old legend called a 24-year-old innovator to pass the torch. Fred Astaire was telling Michael Jackson that he was worthy, that he had taken dance to a new place, that the tradition would continue in good hands. 8 seconds. That's all the moonwalk was in that first performance. But in those 8 seconds, Michael Jackson showed the world that the impossible was possible, that artists could still surprise us, that there were still new moves to discover and new ways to move. And somewhere, Fred Astaire was smiling, his fingers doing a little moonwalk on the arm of his chair, knowing that the art he loved would live on. If this story of Michael Jackson's first moonwalk inspired you, make sure to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to remember that 8 seconds of courage can change the world. Have you ever taken a risk that others thought was crazy, but you believed in completely? Tell us in the comments. Hit that notification bell for more true stories about the moments that changed music history forever.